The apartment felt unusually quiet that evening. Andrew stood in front of the full-length mirror that hung awkwardly on the back of his bathroom door, a remnant of a life that once included a wife and a shared routine. The Superman costume lay sprawled across his bed like a promise of escape, a vivid blue fabric adorned with a bright red cape and the iconic S emblazoned across the chest. He picked up the costume, the spandex cool and slippery between his fingers, and thought back to the day Judy had left. The echo of the door slamming shut still rang in his ears whenever the silence grew too loud. "You're not the man I married, Andrew," Judy had said, her voice devoid of the warmth he once knew. "You're just... not enough. Not enough." The words had burrowed deep, festering like a wound that refused to heal. He stepped into the suit, pulling it up over his shoulders and tugging at the edges. As he zipped it up, a transformation began, not of body, but of mind. In the mirror, he no longer saw Andrew Stevenson, the man whose inadequacies had driven his wife into another's arms. Instead, he saw power, invincibility, a hero. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his reflection. He hesitated, then decided Superman wouldn't shy away from a visitor. Swallowing his doubts, he opened the door. His neighbor, Mrs. Gilmore, stood at the threshold, her eyes widening in a mix of surprise and amusement. "Oh my!" she exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth. "Andrew, is there a costume party I didn't know about?" Andrew chuckled, the sound more nervous than he intended. "Just trying something new, Mrs. Gilmore. Maybe life needs a bit of superhero flair these days." "Well, you certainly look the part," she smiled, her earlier surprise giving way to a supportive nod. "Just remember, it's the man underneath that counts. Superman is only as strong as Clark Kent allows himself to be." Her words, meant to be encouraging, lingered with Andrew long after she had walked away. He returned to the mirror, staring at the figure clad in red and blue. The suit was a mask, a facade. But maybe, just maybe, it could also be a bridge to confidence, to recovery, to a new version of himself that could face the world without fear. Turning away from his reflection, Andrew felt a resolve settle within him. Tomorrow, he would walk out into the world, not just as Superman, but as a man ready to redefine what it meant to be strong. Andrew woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. Today, he wouldn't just be Andrew, he would be Superman. As he donned the costume once again, the fabric felt like a second skin, molding his insecurities into something outwardly formidable. Stepping outside his apartment was like stepping onto a stage. The morning was crisp, the streets bustling with the usual city rhythm of hurried footsteps and distant sirens. People turned to stare as he walked by. Some snickered, others admired, but all noticed him, a novelty he found both exhilarating and daunting. As he neared the local cafe, he could feel the weight of every gaze. The flutter in his stomach grew, not from fear, but from the thrill of stepping so far out of his comfort zone. Inside the cafe, the chatter quieted momentarily as patrons and staff turned their attention to him. Andrew took a deep breath and approached the counter, where a barista with a shock of red hair and a sprinkle of freckles greeted him with a wide grin. "Looks like we've got a celebrity in the house," she joked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "What can I get for you, Superman?" Andrew felt a smile tug at his lips. "Just a coffee, please, black." "Coming right up," she said. As she turned to make his drink, another customer, a middle-aged man with a newspaper under his arm, leaned over from his table nearby. "Don't take this the wrong way, but why the costume? Some kind of promotion or just feeling super today?" the man asked, genuine curiosity replacing any hint of mockery in his tone. Andrew paused, considering his response. This was the first real test of his new persona. "You could say I'm trying to bring a little hope to the streets," he replied, his voice more confident than he felt. "Sometimes we all need a hero, don't we?" The man nodded thoughtfully. "I'll drink to that. We sure do, buddy. We sure do." The barista returned with his coffee, giving him a supportive smile. "Here you go, Superman." On the house today. We could all use a bit more heroism around here. Thank you, Andrew said, feeling a warm glow that wasn't just from the coffee. He took a seat by the window, watching the world outside. People continued to look his way, some pointing and whispering, but inside the cafe, he felt a sense of belonging that had eluded him for too long. He realized then that Superman wasn't just a mask to hide behind, it was a means to connect, to inspire, even in small ways. And as he sipped his coffee, Andrew knew that this first flight in his cape and suit was just the beginning. The novelty of Andrew's Superman persona quickly transformed from a personal experiment into a local sensation. As he made his daily appearances on the streets, more people began recognizing him, some even waiting for him at his usual spots to take photos or simply share a moment with the neighborhood's new icon. His once solitary walks through the city became interactive performances of hope and joy. One sunny afternoon, Andrew decided to visit Central Park, a place where city dwellers sought solace and children played with carefree abandon. As he strolled along the pathways, he noticed a group of children playing near the Bethesda fountain, their laughter ringing through the air. He approached slowly, aware of the heads turning in his direction. A little girl, no older than 7, broke away from her friends and ran up to him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Are you really Superman?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. Andrew knelt down to her level, smiling beneath the mask. "Today I am," he replied softly. "And what's your name, young lady?" "Emma," she said, beaming. "Can you really fly?" "I can," Andrew played along. "But today I'm just walking, keeping everyone safe on the ground." Emma's mother approached, her expression a mix of surprise and amusement. "I hope she's not bothering you," she said, reaching for her daughter. "Not at all," Andrew reassured her, standing up. "It's all part of the job." "Thank you for being so kind," the mother said, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "You know, you've been quite the talk of the town. It's wonderful to see someone spreading joy these days." Their conversation was interrupted as other children gathered around, each one eager to talk to Superman. Parents took pictures, and Andrew found himself swept up in a flurry of questions and playful banter. As the crowd dispersed, a local blogger who had been observing from a distance approached him. She introduced herself as Lisa, holding up her camera with a professional ease. "I've been following your exploits, Superman. Mind if I feature you on my blog? People would love to hear why you do this." Andrew hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, why not?" he said. "I started this to make a difference, even if it's just a small one. It's about reminding people that there's still good in the world." Lisa smiled, her camera clicking away. "That's a wonderful message. Do you mind if I ask a few more questions? I think your story could really inspire people." As they sat on a nearby bench, Andrew shared his thoughts on heroism and vulnerability, his words thoughtful and sincere. Lisa listened intently, her nods encouraging him to open up more than he had initially planned. The article went live the next day, and Andrew's fame grew overnight. His inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own stories of hardship and thanking him for his courage and inspiration. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon he was not just a neighborhood curiosity, but a citywide symbol of hope. Andrew felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also invigorated by the positive impact he was making. As he read through the messages of support and gratitude, he realized that what started as a personal journey of healing was blossoming into something much larger, a movement of hope, spurred by a simple act of donning a Superman costume. The unexpected fame that came with being the local Superman brought numerous opportunities and challenges for Andrew, one of which was a formal interview request from Jessica Ross, a reporter for the New York Times. Intrigued and a bit nervous about the prospect of sharing his story with a broader audience, Andrew agreed to meet Jessica at a quiet cafe that had become a frequent stop for him during his walks. As Andrew arrived at the cafe, he spotted Jessica waiting with a notepad and a gentle, reassuring smile. She stood up to greet him, extending her hand. "Andrew, I'm Jessica Ross. Thank you for meeting me today." I've been looking forward to hearing your story, she said, her voice warm and inviting. Thank you for taking an interest, Andrew replied, shaking her hand. He felt a mix of excitement and apprehension, knowing that the conversation they were about to have could further expose him to public scrutiny. They settled into a secluded corner of the cafe. Jessica started by setting her recorder on the table, ensuring it was unobtrusive. First of all, she began, flipping open her notepad, what inspired you to start wearing the Superman costume around the city? It's quite an unconventional way to spread hope. Andrew took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. It started as a personal challenge, a way to overcome my own feelings of inadequacy after my divorce. I felt invisible, powerless. Superman is the antithesis of that, strong, confident, a symbol of hope and resilience. I thought, if I could bring even a fraction of that to people's lives, maybe it would make a difference. Jessica nodded, jotting down notes. That's quite profound. And how has the response been from the community? It's been overwhelmingly positive, Andrew answered, a smile breaking through his initial nervousness. People seem to appreciate a reminder that there's still good in the world, that someone cares. It's turned into something bigger than I ever anticipated. Jessica leaned in, her expression curious. Has this experience changed you in any way? How do you reconcile the persona of Superman with being Andrew? That's a good question, Andrew pondered for a moment. It's complicated. Wearing the costume, I feel stronger, more outgoing. But it's also a mask. Over time, I've started to integrate the qualities I admire in Superman into my own life. Confidence, compassion. It's helping me rebuild myself. Jessica's eyes lit up with understanding. That's a powerful statement, Andrew. Many might see wearing a costume as escapism, but it sounds like it's been transformative for you. Yes, exactly, Andrew confirmed, feeling a sense of relief that she grasped the essence of his journey. It started as escapism, but became a way to connect with others and myself on a deeper level. The interview continued with Jessica asking about specific interactions and stories from his walks around the city. Andrew shared anecdotes of people he had met, moments that had touched him, and the unexpected ways in which this experience had enriched his life. As they wrapped up, Jessica turned off her recorder and smiled. Thank you, Andrew. Your story is genuinely inspiring. There's a lesson in it about the power of vulnerability and the strength it takes to show kindness in a world that often seems indifferent. Thank you, Jessica, Andrew said, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He had been anxious about how his story would be portrayed, but Jessica's empathetic approach gave him hope that it would be received positively. As Andrew left the cafe, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The interview wasn't just a recounting of his actions. It was a reflection on the growth and change he had experienced through his journey as Superman. Now, more than ever, he was ready to face whatever came next, with or without the cape. After the interview with Jessica Ross, Andrew's daily routine as Superman took on a new depth, marked by the introspection her questions had sparked. The suit, once a symbol of unmitigated strength and resilience, began to feel like a veneer that was growing thinner with each outing. Doubts crept in, whispering that perhaps the real strength lay in facing the world without the shield of his alter ego. It was during one of his regular walks through Riverside Park that these doubts came to a head. The fall air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot, creating a soundtrack to his tumultuous thoughts. As he strolled along the path, a familiar face approached him. Mr. Jenkins, an elderly man he had helped several times before, always appreciative of Superman's presence. "Superman, always a pleasure to see you," Mr. Jenkins greeted him with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "Hello, Mr. Jenkins. How are you today?" Andrew responded, managing a smile despite the internal turmoil. "I'm doing well, thanks to you. You know, I've been meaning to ask you something," Mr. Jenkins said, his tone turning serious. "Do you ever get tired of wearing that suit all the time? Don't you feel like you're hiding behind a mask?" Andrew paused, taken aback by the perceptiveness of the question. "It's funny you should ask that. I've been wondering the same thing myself lately," Mr. Jenkins nodded sagely. It's easy to hide our true selves, thinking it protects us from the world. But sometimes it's our real faces, our real struggles that connect us most deeply with others. Andrew felt a pang of truth in those words. I started wearing this to inspire others, to bring hope. But maybe it's time I find a way to do that without the costume, to show that we're all capable of being heroes in our own ways. That sounds like the kind of hero we really need, Mr. Jenkins replied, patting Andrew on the shoulder. One who shows us that true courage is being yourself, no matter how tough that might be. The conversation stayed with Andrew as he continued his walk, each step feeling heavier than the last. The suit, once a source of confidence, now seemed to weigh him down. By the time he reached a quiet overlook by the water, he was deep in thought, barely noticing the city skyline across the river. As he stood there, a young woman approached, her small son tugging at her hand excitedly. Look, Mommy, it's Superman, the boy shouted, running up to Andrew with wide-eyed admiration. Hello there, young man, Andrew greeted him, forcing enthusiasm. The boy looked up at him with earnest curiosity. Are you going to save the world today? Andrew chuckled softly, ruffling the boy's hair. I think today I'm just saving myself a little bit. Even Superman needs a day off now and then. The boy seemed to ponder this for a moment, then nodded solemnly. My mom says it's okay to take breaks so you can be stronger later. Your mom is very wise, Andrew said, glancing up at the woman who smiled appreciatively at their exchange. As they walked away, the boy waving back at him, Andrew felt a resolve forming. The mask was comforting, but perhaps it was also a barrier to genuine connections and to embracing his vulnerabilities without a guise. That evening, as he took off the suit back at his apartment, Andrew felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Tomorrow, he would walk the same paths, meet the same people, but as Andrew, not Superman. It was time to test if he could carry the spirit of the hero without the trappings of one. Andrew woke up to a morning that felt different than all the rest. Today, he would not don the familiar blue and red suit that had become his second skin. Today, he was just Andrew, and that thought alone sent a ripple of both excitement and anxiety through him. Stepping out of his apartment felt like stepping into a new world. The absence of the suit made him feel more exposed, more human, but also more genuine. He walked the familiar route to the park, his senses heightened, aware of every glance that didn't linger, every passerby who didn't recognize him. At the park, Andrew sat on a bench, watching the world go by. An elderly woman struggled with a large bag near him. Normally, he would rush to help as Superman, a grand gesture under the guise of heroism. Hesitant, he approached her as himself. May I help you with that? Andrew asked, his voice free of the deeper, more heroic tone he usually put on. The woman looked up, surprised, then smiled. Oh, thank you, young man. That's very kind of you. As he helped her, the woman chatted amiably. You know, I see that Superman fellow around here a lot. He's quite something, isn't he? Andrew smiled, a tinge of nostalgia in his voice. Yes, he is, but sometimes it's the everyday kindnesses that really make the difference, don't you think? Absolutely, the woman agreed. Real heroism isn't always about spectacle. It's about doing what you can, when you can. Encouraged by the interaction, Andrew continued his walk, feeling a growing sense of purpose. It wasn't long before he encountered a group of volunteers setting up for a local charity event. He had often helped out as Superman, making a show of his participation. Today, he approached them as just another volunteer. Need a hand? He offered to a woman unloading boxes from a truck. She looked over, a bit stressed and tired. Oh, that would be great, thanks. As they worked together to set up, the woman glanced at him curiously. You know, you remind me a bit of Superman. He comes around a lot. But today, it's nice to see just regular folks helping out. Andrew laughed. Yeah, Superman has his place, but today I'm just Andrew. Andrew, then, she smiled warmly. It's good to have you here. The day continued with more small interactions, each one building Andrew's confidence that his worth as a person did not depend on a cape and suit. As the sun began to set, he found himself back on the bench where his day had started. He watched as children played and couples walked hand in hand, their ordinary happiness a testament to the day's quiet revelations. Just then, a little girl dropped her ice cream on the ground and started crying. Her father tried to console her, but the tears wouldn't stop. Andrew remembered how Superman would have swooped in, a dramatic gesture to save the day. But today, he approached quietly, pulling out a napkin to clean up the mess. "Hey, it's okay to cry over spilled ice cream," he said gently to the girl. "But how about we get you another one?" Her tears slowed as she looked up at him, sniffing. "Really?" "Really," Andrew confirmed with a nod. "Let's go." As they walked to the nearby vendor, the father whispered to Andrew, "Thank you. You might not be Superman, but today you're her hero." Andrew realized that heroism wasn't about the grand gestures or the costume. It was about the small moments of kindness, the willingness to be present, and the courage to be oneself. The real hero was inside him all along, suit or no suit. The air felt different that morning. It carried a sense of renewal that only the brave or the foolish could summon at the cusp of significant change. For Andrew, it was a day of reckoning, a day to officially shed the cape and embrace the world as just Andrew, not the symbol of hope he had been parading as. He packed away the costume, folding it neatly into a box labeled Memories. Walking through the streets without the cape, Andrew felt a curious blend of vulnerability and liberation. He was just another face in the crowd now, devoid of the admiring glances and enthusiastic waves that had become a staple of his daily routine. But this anonymity was what he sought, what he needed to find himself again. In the afternoon, Andrew visited the local community center where he had volunteered frequently as Superman. Today, he entered unnoticed, blending in perfectly. Inside, he approached the coordinator, Mrs. Lynn, a kind woman in her 50s who had always praised Superman's contributions. "Mrs. Lynn," Andrew greeted, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "I'd like to help out today, if you need any extra hands." Mrs. Lynn looked up, her expression changing from mild surprise to recognition. "Andrew, isn't it? I've seen you around. Yes, of course, we'd love your help. It's interesting. We usually see Superman helping out." Andrew smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, Superman needed a break. I figured I'd step in for him." "That's wonderful to hear," Mrs. Lynn said, leading him towards a group organizing donations. "It's the ordinary acts of kindness that often make the biggest difference." As he worked, sorting through boxes and arranging items on shelves, another volunteer, a young woman named Claire, struck up a conversation with him. "So, you decided to hang up the cape?" she asked, having recognized him from the local news. "Yeah, it was time," Andrew replied, placing a box on the shelf. "Time to be me again, without the theatrics." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "It must feel like you're stepping out from behind a mask. Is it hard, losing that part of your identity?" "In a way, yes. But it's also freeing. I've learned that I don't need a mask to make a difference. Just being here, helping like this, it's enough," Andrew said, feeling more confident with each word. "I always thought that was the truest form of heroism," Claire said with a smile. "Being brave enough to be yourself and help others, no superpowers needed." Their conversation was interrupted as Mrs. Lynn called everyone to gather around. She announced the opening of a new program to help local youths, expressing her gratitude for all the volunteers. After the meeting, Andrew stayed behind to help clean up. Mrs. Lynn approached him, her eyes kind and knowing. "You know, Andrew, many people looked up to Superman, but I think they'll find just as much to admire in you." Andrew felt a warm sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, Mrs. Lynn. That means a lot. I guess we all have a hero inside us. Sometimes it just doesn't wear a cape." As he left the community center, the setting sun cast long shadows on the pavement, and Andrew felt his step lighten. Shedding the cape hadn't diminished him. If anything, it had broadened his horizon. He was no longer a symbol. He was a participant in the human experience, flawed but striving, ordinary yet extraordinary in his everyday courage. As the first light of dawn streaked across the city skyline, Andrew woke to a day filled with promise and new possibilities. The past weeks of living without the Superman costume had brought him a profound sense of peace and self-discovery. Today he was meeting Jessica Ross again, this time not for an interview, but to share how his journey had evolved since they last spoke. Walking to the cafe where they agreed to meet, Andrew noticed the small beauties of the city that he often overlooked. The way the morning light danced on the buildings, the sound of the bustling city waking up. It was as if he was seeing his world for the first time again, this time with eyes wide open. Jessica was already there, sitting by the window with 2 coffees on the table. She looked up and smiled as Andrew approached. "Andrew, it's good to see you again. You look different," Jessica noted, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Good different, I hope," Andrew replied, taking a seat. "I feel lighter, somehow more myself." "I'm glad to hear that. Tell me, what's changed since you hung up the cape?" Jessica asked, her pen poised above her notepad, though it seemed more out of habit than necessity this time. "A lot, actually. I've started seeing the world not as a place that needs saving, but as a place that needs understanding and compassion. I'm engaging more as myself, not as a character. It feels more honest, more impactful," Andrew shared, his voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. Jessica nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "That sounds like a deeper, more sustainable way to live. Do you miss being Superman?" "At first I did. It was hard to step out without the armor," Andrew admitted. "But I've come to realize that the real strength I admired in Superman came from within me, not from the suit. I don't need a cape to be someone's hero or my own." "That's a powerful realization," Jessica remarked, clearly impressed. "It sounds like you found a true sense of purpose." "I have, and I'm using that to contribute in more grounded, meaningful ways. I've been working with local charities, helping at the community center, and I've started a blog to share my experiences and thoughts on real-life heroism. How everyday acts of kindness are really the fabric of heroism." Jessica smiled warmly. "I think that's a wonderful evolution of your journey. It's something that will inspire many, Andrew. Real-life heroism. I like that. Do you mind if I quote you on that for a follow-up piece?" "Of course not, Jessica. Share away. If my story can inspire at least one person to embrace their own version of heroism, then it's worth it," Andrew said, a gentle determination in his tone. As they continued to talk, the conversation flowed easily, more like a chat between friends than a formal interview. When it was time to leave, Andrew felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected path that had led him here. Walking back through the city, Andrew felt a profound connection to the world around him. He knew challenges lay ahead, but he also knew he had the strength to meet them, not as Superman, but as Andrew, a real person with real power to make a difference. The final words he exchanged with Jessica lingered in his mind as he moved forward. "Here's to new beginnings, Andrew. Here's to real-life heroes, Jessica." With a confident stride, Andrew walked into the tapestry of the city, ready to weave his own story of quiet heroism into its vast, vibrant life. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If today's story resonated with you, or if you've experienced similar challenges in your relationships, remember you're not alone. We hope this video offers some insight or comfort as you navigate your own path forward. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your perspectives and would love to hear your stories too. Join us next time for another profound exploration of the heart's resilience. Until then, take care and keep seeking your truth.